Just build a bunch of
Welcome back to the show. Oh my God, I missed my line. Welcome back to the show. We're about to learn the secret sauce.
All right, so yeah, secret sauce. It's an opportunity for us to talk to maintainers, founders about their open source strategy, how they started. VConf, you guys have been doing a great job with VConf.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a great, it's great what you're doing with the community, but also makes so much sense for what you're building. But before we jump into that, could you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell us who Eric is?
Totally. So I'm Eric Simons. I'm the co-founder and CEO of StackBlitz. StackBlitz is a instant web-based IDE. So if you think of, if you are, a coworker, it's like, hey, can you review my pull request? Normally you have to stash your changes locally. And it's this whole process. Wouldn't it be great if you could just have one click and just boom in your browser instantly, kind of like Figma, just crack a link open, you're in it. You can do that code review. You can just throw out the tab when you're done. Or if you want to create a pull request, you have to pull down the repo. So that's what StackBlitz is, just very, very fast web-based IDE. It's used by a lot of open source projects. So if usually people are like, what is StackBlitz? And we tell them, they're like, I think I've seen that. And it's like, yeah, you probably ran across an open source project in the docs where you clicked a link that said run this code in StackBlitz and that sort of thing.
Perfect use case too as well. When I go through a tutorial and someone has the StackBlitz link in the tutorial or the guide inside of GitHub, it's I know I can actually start doing stuff rather than clone it, run it, Docker image, whatever.
Totally.
It's Docker's done a lot for us and containers have done a lot for us, but if I could just run this in the browser tab,
yeah,
beautiful.
It's really handy, right? And it's because if you look at this is kind of the impetus of why. And what's kind of interesting about Stack is because web-based IDs are not a new thing, right? I think the first one was Cloud9 back in 2009,
yes.
2010.
Yep.
But the way everyone has done it in the past is when you click that link to open a Cloud9 instance or CodeSpace or whatever the new things are, it's not actually running it in your browser. It's actually spinning up a VM in the cloud that your browser's, it's really not, your browser's not doing anything. It's a glorified text area.
Yeah.
That as you type keystrokes in, it has to send that to the server that does the work and then sends it back. And so kind of the problem with that model though, these things have never really caught on, right? And it's because there's a couple of issues is one, you're introducing latency. So for web development, UI, you want instant feedback loops. I mean, people, these open source tools are competing to a ridiculous degree on how fast is your HMR time. It's 17 milliseconds, 10 mil, it's just crazy, right? But if you're syncing that to a server and back, it's you're adding seconds onto that round trip. But then usually you also have to pay by the minute to use these things because someone's got to pick up the cost of this thing. So for those reasons, these things haven't really taken off. And but if you look at Figma or Google Docs, these other productivity tools that have worked, when you open a Figma link, they're not spinning up a VM to render that thing on your screen. They're actually running that entirely in your browser using your GPU, your memory, your CPU. And so that's actually the same approach StackBlitz uses. And so we're the first folks that really have been able to do this in a meaningful way where you can actually run an entire operating system inside of your browser tab. So it's super fast, super instant. I can't remember what the heck I was going to tie that into. That's really the thing that makes StackBlitz super unique is you can just open these, for these open source projects, you don't have to sign in to use StackBlitz. You can just use it anonymously because it's just using your own local CPU memory to do the job. And it's super fast. It boots in a couple hundred milliseconds.
Yeah. And the use case the use case is the tutorial that sorry, let me take this back. My introduction to StackBlitz is through these tutorials that people would just throw StackBlitz on. The best use case of these tutorials was when Nader Dabit put a Web3 course together, and part of that course is don't worry about all this sort of blockchain stuff. Let's just run this and it will work. And I was wow. Every time I tried to do any sort of Ethereum, blockchain, build a dApp or whatever, it's I gotta install this. Oh, it's been 6 months. I gotta do this. No one uses that anymore. But having a full-on setup where I can just be successful while learning this thing, absolute beautiful experience, which is the power behind under the hood web container, right? Yeah. That's the tool.
Yep.
Can you talk about what is web container and the associated the WebAssembly?
Yeah. So web container is this thing that we built, and it was kind of this giant bet, this giant technology bet we made. And so I think it was back I think we started the project like 2018, 2019. So we built the first version of StackBlitz. We launched it in August of 2017. And it was kind of like at that time, what we had figured out was like, the key realization was that we were like, wow, browsers have gotten really powerful, and it should be possible actually to run at least some parts of your dev environment in a browser tab, right? And because when you look at all the tools out there, like Webpack and NPM back in like 2016, you know, it was like, oh, these are all written in JavaScript. It's like targeting Node, but like we could probably like hack these or like kind of strip them down to run in a browser. And so that's the first version of StackBlitz was this kind of, it was like, we got like a baby version of NPM and a baby version of Webpack running in a browser tab.
Yeah.
It was like really fast. And like, and so people, you know, started to adopt it, and it was adopted by a lot of open source projects. And we learned a lot by building that, the V1 of StackBlitz. And we had this realization a year or two in, like 2018 or 2019, we were like, oh, wow, actually, with the advent of like WebAssembly and service workers and, you know, a handful of other things, it actually should be possible now to not just kind of, you know, custom create these Webpack, like a version of Webpack and NPM, but actually go a level deeper and create like a micro operating system in WebAssembly that is capable of running all of Node.js on top of that. And then you can just run any tool chain, full stack even, because with service workers, it's effectively, you know, a way of running a server in a browser in a sense. You have to do there's a lot of crazy stuff we had to do to make this stuff work.
I built a Chrome extension or two. Like I've learned how to finagle the system.
Yeah, totally. And anyway, so what Web Container is just, it's like a you know, instant booting micro operating system that can run inside of a browser, right? Inside of a tab in your browser, and can, you know, we've been able to make this you know, run Node.js wholesale with all of the different package managers and tool chains and et cetera. And so that's really the main thing that StackBlitz, probably the biggest technical innovation that we've made. And it took us, I mean, we started the project in, I think literally January of 2019. It took us 2.5 years to ship the absolute bare bones thing working in 2021. And only last year we marked it stable in Chrome. And literally yesterday was when the first day that we announced that it's working in Safari. So it's just, it's finally we're working across all browsers and devices and et cetera. Because it was just really on the cutting edge of like what you can do in a browser engine. You know,
that's wild. That's like some time investment in there.
Huge. It was, I mean, it was a huge risk. Like, and so when you kind of look at, there's this like maybe a side tangent, but like, you know, from like an investment point of view, because StackBlitz is a company, right? And so when we raise money, the type of investment this is kind of classified as, or at least at that time, it's a kind of a classic deep technology play, where with like a deep technology play, the risk is all front loaded, where it's the commercial viability is much less, it's much less risky, assuming the technical stuff can actually be possible. But back in 2019, we would talk to people that were, you know, experts in JavaScript or Node or whatever, or browsers, and they thought we were nuts. You know, they're like, there's no way this will work. And we were like, it might not, who knows? Like, we really had no idea. And then it was like, okay, we got working in Chrome. How about Firefox? And then Firefox last year, and then this year, like Safari, maybe, you know. And anyway, so it's been fun it's been the biggest long bet I've ever worked on in my career. I think most of the people at the company, this kind of 4-year, you know, running long bet on this thing.
Can we take a step back into like, how did you get to this point, like your career prior to StackBlitz? So like, you mentioned your co-founder is a friend of yours from back in the day. Both learned how to code. Yep. At 13.
Yes. Yeah.
So like 13 to what were you building? What were you building? WordPress pages or whatever?
Yeah. Even more ugly as shit was spaghetti PHP and, you know, jQuery. but yeah. So Albert Pye, he's the co-founder of StackBlitz, CTO, and Albert and I have been you know, childhood best friends since I think we met each other in middle school. We were playing football together or something. And I think Albert's first memory of me is me axing a whole bunch of people in the you know, junior high locker room after football practice or something. But anyway, so Albert and I became friends. He lives down the street from, his parents still live down the street from my parents in Naperville, Illinois, suburb of Chicago.
Naperville.
Yeah. Yep. And So Albert and I, when we were about 13, like he and I were super into building computers, like PCs and that sort of thing. And we kind of like at Mac, you can only do that so many times before it's like, you're just putting a memory stick in, you're putting a different graphics card in. It's fun, but it's just, you're kind of limited. And then, so we kind of turned our attention to software because it's just infinite, right? What you can do. And so we wanted to build websites because and even now the web is the most ubiquitous platform, but especially back in 2005, 6, before the App Store even existed, iPhones really, it was like, that was the thing to work on. And, but also back then there was not this, crazy amount of great tutorials and whatever online to learn this stuff. So for our 13th birthdays, we asked our parents for programming books, and these things were expensive, like $100
for your birthday.
Yeah, because I mean they're like $100 a pop.
Yeah,
it's just like
those, they teach them in college, so college books.
Yeah, like and so it was like we didn't make money. We were like 13 or whatever, and we're like, all right, I don't want an Xbox for my birthday. I want these programming books. And like, are you sure? And like, yeah. And so Albert and I learned together, and so we were like, I think it was like PHP and MySQL and JavaScript, kind of like the LAMP stack stuff back then. And we've been building stuff together ever since. Like we built a whole bunch of projects throughout high school. We just, we went on Craigslist. We were like doing software contracting for web apps and WordPress and that sort of thing at the time. And then we came out to Silicon Valley about 11, 12 years ago. And we've just been kind of building different startups and side projects and stuff ever since.
Both you and Albert the entire time?
The entire time.
Wow.
Yeah. So he and I have just kind of been building stuff literally ever since we learned to code together. And candidly, so like the first half of our time in Silicon Valley was like, it was, we were 18, 19. So we went through a whole bunch of different ideas, and we were building lots of web apps, and none of them were really working,
Do you have an example of some of that didn't work?
Yeah, there's one, like we got pretty desperate. And so at one point we were like, okay, because all we were doing was we were like, okay, we want to solve a problem that we have. We never do anything other than stay inside of our house
and write code.
And so we're like, okay, so let's make an app. Let's make an app that we got a lot better at branding over the years. And so this is one of the failures of that kind of led us to become better. But we're like, okay, we got to get outside the house. So like, let's create an app where you can like browse things to do and like whatever. And we're gonna call it Outhouse, right? Which turns
just build a bunch of.
And we applied the YC with the thing. I think we still have the video. We look back like, God, what were we thinking, And but so that was just, it was like we went through all these ideas. We had some that were really cool, and what ended up happening, right? So we were building tons of web apps, and we needed to stay afloat. We needed to pay rent, and so we would do some contracting to stay afloat and that sort of thing. But we ended up starting a site called Thinkster.io that basically, this was back in 2013, right when AngularJS hit the scene.
Okay.
It was like, or 2012, 2013. And AngularJS became like the thing. Everyone was rewriting their stuff to use AngularJS. And so we had like kind of the foundational tutorial, which was just like a blog we were making at the time. Got a ton of traffic. It's probably still the number one thing. If you search like learn Angular or whatever, it's, the number one thing. And then React came out. So we started like teaching stuff like that. And so kind of at the peak of the thing, we had a couple 100,000 people a month that were visiting the site, and we were selling courses on it, kind of like Egghead or Lynda or that sort of model. And it was like a very cool lifestyle business. But that's actually where StackBlitz popped out of. Is we were just kind of grinding, teaching people. And, what did we know? We knew how to build web apps because we were building a ton of them and not having a lot of luck on the business side. But we were on the cutting edge of how to build stuff fast and in a high quality way. And but as we were building Thinkster, the biggest problem we would have is that people would come and learn from the tutorial, and they would run into the same thing.
Use case.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And it was the same problem that Albert and I had when we were 13, which is like getting your dev environment set up is a nightmare because stuff just goes wrong. It's like, and things are inexplicably. You can follow the directions to a T, and just something almost always goes wrong, right? Regardless if you're a beginner or experienced. And so the same thing was happening with Thinkster. People were like, hey, I'm going through your React tutorial, and React says I'm out of file watchers. And it's like, that is like not React. It has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so that was like, we're like, why can't we just have like a CodePen type thing that runs these Webpack loaders?
Yeah.
And so that kind of led us down this path.
Yeah. And you bring up CodePen because like JS REPL, CodePen, Replit had existed, but I think it was JS REPL, but Replit wasn't even a company at that point.
Yeah.
So like there weren't a lot of options
at
that point. And like Cloud9 got maybe gobbled up in AWS or something like that. And there's a few other ones that just sort of fizzled out.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, we've got the idea. We could do this.
Yeah. Well, and we looked around because we were just like, we were so, laser focused. And we were like, we need to make this course because we got to pay rent next month. Right. And like, and we're getting slogged in support questions, and so we were just trying to like make a good experience.
Yeah.
And I was just looking around and I was like, someone has to have done this, right? Like someone's way, because I never thought I'd be making developer tools or IDEs or anything like that. But no one had done this, and we were just like, the more we dug in, we were like, wait a second, like this is okay. No one's done this yet because the web has just hit this point.
Yeah.
And we had also met a friend of ours from I think probably in 2012, 2013 was Dilla Field, the co-founder CEO of Figma.
Figma, yeah.
And so we had spent time. I remember I was on the Caltrain with him back in like 2012 or 2013, and he was telling me about how he's making Photoshop for the browser. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think
$20 billion later.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if people are going to, use a web-based thing, and can the web even do that? And he was totally right. He was like, the web's hit a new, it's powerful. It's this WebGL stuff, like, is changing the game for it, and WebAssembly. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so all that stuff kind of came back to us, and we were like, holy cow, this might be the moment actually for development where you could do that same sort of thing. Anyway, so it was like kind of this culmination of 8 years of just kind of pain and learning, and just having fun building stuff, and it just kind of came together. It was like, wow, this is actually, it seems like maybe right place, right time. And we're just kind of,
I'd say, like, especially with the web container stuff and WebAssembly, like WebAssembly, I've definitely watched a lot of talks and tutorials and Mozilla and all that they push to make this a thing. And like, even Google's invested in WebAssembly. But it's like, it was always like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, good luck with that. Like, kind of like your Photoshop in the browser thing. It's like, yeah, cool idea, dude. But now you see more. Like, I was just talking to the founder of Fermion, which is like WebAssembly meets Heroku meets like, I'm not selling his product very well, but should definitely have him on. But yeah, it's crazy that 2019 is when you started the problem. And you just sort of knock down like the next browser, and now it's worse in Safari. Just recently. So it's a company. Did you guys end up taking funding? Have you bootstrapped this thing the whole time?
We bootstrapped it for a while, as long as we possibly could. And the problem with this is like, and this is kind of the nature of deep technology plays, is like they're upfront expensive because you're spending a lot of time on a giant science project that it either works 100% or it doesn't commercially, right? And so we try to bootstrap for as long as we could. And we got to a point where we're like, okay, like, this is about as good as bad as you could, and I think that's a good time to raise money, is when you're like, we have done absolutely everything to prove that this is like viable. Like, this is an investment. I mean, it could go either way. We have done as much as humanly possible without just hiring some great folks, a couple of great folks come on and just do it. Like, that's, what I mean? And we were also fully prepared to fail at fundraising and go get jobs, because we were like, we gotta go one way or the other on this. And fortunately we found some investors that were at least as crazy as us, or they were like, these guys are nuts, or maybe they're not. And either we'll find out, But so we raised a seed back in 2019. We've raised some more money since then recently. We haven't announced anything, but so we've been able to grow the company a good amount, and like we've been able to actually commercialize it too, and actually sell to like enterprise companies and that sort of thing. So it's pretty cool to be able to actually kind of take something, maybe not all the way through to IPO yet or whatever have you, but at least to take something like that off the ground is it's a lot of work, like more work than you can imagine, and more rewarding, I think, than I would have imagined too,
Yeah. I mean, you came out here, which is like wild. You all came out here at 18, 19 years old, building a bunch of projects, trying to figure out what the project that was going to work, which was the project that could build more projects with, which is StackBlitz, which is kind of in itself is like amazing story. But now you have the project that now enterprises can build projects with. So like being able to, one of the pain points I have in open source is like folks who are not on M2 machines, like ready to go and install like every machine's different now, especially now with the M1, M2 and Linux and everything like that. So when I have a contributor come through in India or in Bangladesh, I don't know how to debug their machine. Like, but what we did in open source in our flagship product is we have a button for StackBlitz.
Oh, nice.
So you can have a repeatable infrastructure that works out of the box and come help us whenever you want.
And that's the beauty of the web, right? And that's what's so cool about it, is that it is the same thing across any device, right? And it's just that, you know, and this is really the pitch of like WebAssembly, where like WebAssembly, there's still a lot of things that they need to land for it to be like, to really start knocking down some of the heavyweight use cases. But that, I mean, I think that's the beauty of it, is it eliminates that issue of like, what it, you know, it works on my machine but not yours, and you know, or you know, whatever difference is. That's such a powerful thing, you know, and that is actually a big reason why enterprise customers, like, you know, look at StackBlitz, go, this is amazing, because it nukes that issue, you know, like the companies will spend like sometimes 6 weeks getting their devs onboarded to their code bases. And like one customer of ours sat down, they're like, okay, well, let's measure how much value is this going to bring us, right? A prudent thing to do, you know, when you're going to purchase something, you know, to the tune of 6 or 7 figures or whatever. And they sat down a developer and they're like, all right, so go get set up with like our production code base locally, measure how long it takes. And it was like 2 man days basically. And they're like, okay, all right, so now do that same thing in StackBlitz. And it was like 10 minutes. And they're like, okay, so we're going to, you know, it's like this ridiculously conservative estimate on it. They're like, we're going to like, you know, conservatively, if each developer at our company opens StackBlitz once in a given year, we're going to save $500,000. And she's like, and they're going to be opening this like way more than one time per year, right? But it's so valuable. It's so much better to just like have a thing you just click and, you know, anyway, so this is not, and this is like totally not intentionally a sales pitch for our thing, but it's just like, this is the value of Figma too. All these things are running, right?
So I wanted to ask that too as well, because like I appreciate the pitch, because like definitely sell your product, like get people to sign up for StackBlitz. Bring it to the enterprise. But also there's other folks who have entered the space as well, like Coder, GitHub Code Spaces. There's probably some other ones, but I'm not paying attention to the space. But you are. So like, how are you different from all these other tools that are coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it fundamentally, no one is doing the in-browser compute approach, right? Because like when you like, so coming back to that same company that I was just talking about, this enterprise company, they have like 3,000 developers, you know, at their company, and so when they're looking at these online IDE things, often they're like, the pitch is, because if you go to like Coder or Code Spaces, they're going to give you kind of something similar to the pitch I gave, right? And they're like, okay, they can one click, they can open it, and they're like, oh, that sounds amazing. And they're like, okay, we'll talk, just how does it work? And then they go, okay, well, it works by like in your VPN, we're going to spin up VMs for every developer when they click a link. And they're like, okay, but like, so, and we like, how do we make sure that that's not, and it's got VPN access to all our stuff? Yeah, it does. Okay. How do we make sure that they aren't opening something up that's just going to start wreaking havoc and pulling secrets? Well, you know, like you have to secure, okay. So then they pull in their SecOps team. They're like, what do you think? They're like, we hate it. Like, you know, this is it, you know, and then they're like, and also wait a second, we're buying our developers $2,000 MacBooks, and then we have to pay by the minute for VMs, and their MacBook isn't doing anything. So it's just like all around, it's like, doesn't make sense financially. The DevSecOps team, you know, the SecOps people hate it. They just do not want it. They rarely ever do the stuff actually get through. And so for those reasons, it's kind of a no-go. Whereas with Stackless, the answer is, like you guys have already approved the runtime. We're not selling you a new runtime that's going to be secure. Like you've already approved it. It's Chrome, it's Firefox, it's Safari. This runs inside of that, and every time a developer clicks a link, they are opening a browser tab, and that's it. There's not some VM that's in your network that can just, you know, be doing supply chain attacks, right? And also the security model of browsers is some of the best in the world. Like when you open a website, you are downloading untrusted code and executing it on your machine. And browsers, you know, have had literally decades to be battle tested at doing that. And for the largest companies in the world to trust them at doing that. And that's a huge thing. When you're talking to companies that are responsible for, I mean, literally trillions of dollars in transaction volume per day or month or year or whatever. Like some of the folks we sell into are like, they are actually monitored by the Department of Homeland Security, just because like, you know, the amount of volume they're doing is critical to just societal stability. And so they have to take this stuff seriously. And so that's, you know, these other guys that they're running on servers, the cost doesn't make sense. The security model is extremely unclear, kind of at best. And the user experience is a lot worse because there's a lot of latency, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we're,
Okay.
you know, kind of compared against the other stuff that's currently out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it goes to your investment in solving the right approach and making that front-loaded investment of the deep tech thing.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense. Like, I'm sold. Like, I want to open up a browser tab. I've definitely used code spaces for those same reasons, but also like spinning up a code space and having it on a VM that doesn't quite have the same URL. Like, to be able to do some front end maps where you're testing, like you have an API and then you have a front end server, and you have to allow list the front end URL, but if the URL is like vscodespaces.cdn.whatever azure dot whatever, now I have to now account for that, so that way my server can talk to the front end I'm just spinning locally in a code space.
Yeah. And it's stuff like that, right? And also because there's like the good use cases for like cloud-based, like cloud server-based IDEs is like when you're dealing with workloads that are so large that you need to parallelize it across like dozens or hundreds, or, you know, like for Google, they were one of the first to build, they built their own in-house IDE called Cider. And reason being is that they hit a problem. Like Google's a giant monorepo, and it was taking on an individual computer, it would take 30 compute days to make one. If you made one change to Google's monorepo, it would be like 30 compute days or something like that, right? Just your computer sitting there, you're sleeping, you know, a month later, you get your change. And it was crazy. And so what they ended up doing is they said, okay, so, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to spin up, you know, thousands of cores, tens of thousands of cores, and developers, as they make a change in this online IDE, Cider, we're going to fan it out, and it's going to be 30 compute seconds, right? You know, across all these cores. That makes a ton of sense. But it's like you need to be, web development workflows typically are not, you know, things like Vite and et cetera, like, you know, often it's like, hey, make the tool faster, you know, and then that kind of, you don't need to like, you know, spin it across 32 cores, right?
Yeah. So what's the world, I guess with WebAssembly, maybe you have the answer, but like now we have these new runtimes, which is like Deno and Bun and a bunch of other stuff that people are just messing around with. Does WebAssembly have an answer to that today?
I think, I think all of those support WebAssembly.
Got it.
And so I think the idea for those is like, so right now we're still in this world where JavaScript, so you can't, from JavaScript, or you can't like initialize a WebAssembly module that is another JavaScript engine and have the JavaScript, that engine, be as fast as like the native JavaScript engine, right? You kind of see what I'm saying? And so the problem with that is that for the time being, having JavaScript as the native runtime is, from a performance perspective, is extremely ideal. And that's the biggest issue with WebAssembly is really performance related. And the reason it's hard to solve is that browsers have to take security seriously, like extremely seriously from day one. And that it just takes a really long time to figure out how do you do this in a really secure way that's also going to be really fast, that also everyone in the world is going to agree on because you have to get Apple and Google and Mozilla and, you know, all these guys to agree on this stuff, and it just takes time. And so for the time being, so like things like Deno and Cloudflare Workers, et cetera, all these things are native, you know, they're native JavaScript, but you can instantiate WebAssembly modules for things that, you know, are going to be more performant than it would be in JavaScript, like image optimization or, you know, kind of a number of those things. But yeah, so I think that Fastly is doing some interesting stuff there though, where they have actually compiled SpiderMonkey, Mozilla, or Firefox's JavaScript engine to run as a WebAssembly module. And the runtime is still slower than what SpiderMonkey native would be. But what's super cool is that they effectively do, like when you load in a JavaScript file into a web page, the browser does all this work of like parsing it, stripping it, turning it into bytecode, and then it's going to begin executing. And typically you can't just like freeze frame all that pre-work and then but they did that. And so you can actually create a WebAssembly module. You give it a JavaScript file, it gives you back this WebAssembly file that includes SpiderMonkey with it. But it includes your JavaScript file completely. Just it's like if you could take a car and like turn the ignition and there's like the and then right before the engine goes, you know, it's like just like that as a WebAssembly module. So it's like it's faster startup time than you could ever get with any other approach effectively. But that sort of stuff is the future. It's just gonna
Yeah.
be, it's gonna be a while before once it does kick up, the runtime is slower than native. Anyways, this is like very deep random stuff, but this, it's just
this is very interesting because like my next question was like, what's next for StackBlitz? Is it like, is there more waiting for you to see the web like get to where you need it to be, or are you now, you've got the product, it works in these different browsers, let's just go?
I think it's both. Yeah. So I think for JavaScript, we're able to leverage kind of the native speeds, which is awesome. So I think for us, from a StackBlitz company perspective and like product perspective, any web development stuff like we can do now, and we're just kind of beginning the journey there of like making development workflows like really, really fast and seamless, et cetera, for web development. And I think on it makes a lot of sense that we would do this for other languages though, like Python or Ruby or whatever have you, and that stuff. So we're part of a group called the Bytecode Alliance, and so so they've driven like the WebAssembly standard interface, a handful of other tools as well, and they're pushing the limits. And so it's mostly like browser vendors, kind of folks like us, et cetera. They're a part of this thing, and so I think what we're doing that's kind of helpful, I think, to that group is web container is like one of the most sophisticated things to run inside of a browser engine. So we're often the first people that are finding bugs that would prevent a lot of these languages or new things to be able to work in the future. Like to do Safari support in the blog post, we outlined actually a handful of things that we caught, and it's just like really low level stuff. But anyway, so I think we're helping kind of get us there maybe a little bit faster, and a lot of these these companies are investing a ton as well to make this a reality. So we're kind of doing both, I guess, is the short answer to your question. But yeah, these things are garbage collection just landed at WebAssembly, and there's other things landing. So things are moving along.
Yeah, this is really cool. I don't participate. Like, I'm familiar with the Bytecode Alliance. I've definitely toyed around with all these WebAssembly projects to do XYZ and these open source projects, and I'm glad I get this benefit from it. Like, from this experience that you're going through, I benefit as, oh yeah, I'm just going to add StackBlitz to the repo because it's going to work. And I don't have to worry about whether you have Linux or whether you have a Mac OS M2 machine. It works.
And here's the crazy thing too, is that actually helps us influence what, like, pushing the web forwards. Because often, with Safari, they were missing just a ton of features when we launched web containers. And we made a list in our docs, like, here are the things that they need to ship for this to work. And so people were began embedding StackBlitz in docs and whatever have you. And then people would open the drive, like, oh, this doesn't work. And then they look at our docs, and then they would go tweet at Safari or email them or whatever. And I think it made a huge difference, because when developers kind of bang on the doors of browser vendors, they actually do listen. And so as people adopt StackBlitz, they're actually, in a very direct way, they're actually helping influence browsers to ship new APIs to make things faster, et cetera, which is super cool, because I think it's just kind of fun, because it's like web developers love the web. If they link to StackBlitz, it's helping the web actually improve and like find bugs and make the web faster or better. So
yeah, that's amazing. And then I was going to ask the browser company, like with Arc, have you looked into that, like in getting StackBlitz to work with them?
I think I might be like kind of a noob here. I think I'm definitely a noob on Arc. I know a handful of folks at our company use it. I think they use Chromium.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
I think they
I literally have the download link in my email. Like, I got the invite and I've never installed it. So maybe this weekend I'll start using it.
If it doesn't work in Arc, let me know, because I think they're using Chromium under the hood. I could be wrong, but yeah, all the Chromium stuff works pretty well generally.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's like Brave does that,
Yes.
and Edge, and et cetera. But yeah, I think we've hit all the major engines at this point, because the main ones are like Safari or WebKit, and then Firefox, SpiderMonkey, and Chromium V8.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got full coverage now on those. So it's like,
that's awesome. Like, it just seems like now, honestly, I think you're way more on the side of like, let's just go and let's see what this, like, talk to a bunch of enterprises and see what happens.
Yeah.
And perhaps you're already there. But yeah, this is exciting, and I was appreciate you coming out and having this conversation. Folks, if you haven't tried StackBlitz, definitely try it out. You probably have tried it, honestly. I feel like, at least in the JavaScript ecosystem, and like if you're learning new tutorials, like they usually have the wall of links to leverage. Click the StackBlitz one.
And if they don't, ask that project to add the wall of links for StackBlitz.
Yeah, exactly. And stay saucy.